Hello, everyone. As you know, I do not participate normally in the discussion boards as they go on, but I do read them. And what I like to do is, after they're done, to do a video where I just comment on student posts. I more or less just choose things that I think are essential points or things that would be helpful to talk about. There's no criteria for certainly of quality or anything like that. I just choose things as they appear to me to be interesting and important, and things that would be helpful to review and to re-review, having to do with the week's readings. So this is something you should expect from me. There'll be a new there's a new link in the main menu of the Blackboard site, and I'll be sending these out as I do them. So, your remark about Hegel. I'm making these anonymous. I'm not attaching names because this is a video I'm making that I'm putting up on YouTube. So I don't want to put anybody's name up. And if you don't want your work to appear at all, even anonymously, that's fine. And just let me know, and no questions asked. I just won't include any excerpts from your work, but that's totally up to you. So okay, student said, what is even more interesting to think about is what he means by painting gray on gray. Obviously, this is out of context. I'm cutting and pasting here. What classifies old thinking and new thinking? If historicism does mark a change in thought and new episodes of life, does this category of gray mean everything is connected? When I first read Hegel's quote, I thought that gray on gray was just covering up old thoughts with new ones. However, if both notions are somehow similar, it is only with deep understanding and the spread of new and old that we can see the two opinions. Well, I'm not saying I understand everything in this quote, but I think it's an interesting commentary on Hegel and the famous Owl of Minerva line. The Owl of Minerva flies at dusk. When philosophy paints its gray on gray, then a form of life's grown old, something like that. And no one's really sure what Hegel meant by that, but one of the things that he obviously meant by that is that philosophy is constantly trying to catch up with history, just as thinking and understanding is always trying to catch up with history. And one of the things I think historicism does mean, and you'll find this in the Margolis quote, is that our understanding of ourselves at any particular time is always partial and incomplete and subject to revision. It's very, very difficult to grasp the present. Certainly, one of the things that Hegel is getting at is that the present only comes into focus when philosophy paints its gray on gray once things have passed. I always took the gray as meaning lifeless. That the present is alive. The past is real, but the past is gone, and the past is in a certain way dead. And when philosophy finally comes to the point where it can understand what has happened, it's painting its gray on gray. It's a rather bloodless enterprise. That's just my personal take on it. But I do think that he and Margolis are both saying that our understanding of ourselves at any particular time is limited and, again, partial and subject to revision. I think that this is quite relevant to reading Marshall McLuhan. Because certainly what Marshall McLuhan was trying to do back in the 60s was understand the present. And he had some wild ideas. And he was wrong about some things, I think. But that was inevitable because he was trying to do something very difficult. Now, this is not to say that the past is really dead. I mean, Faulkner said the past isn't dead, it's not even past. And there was some real truth in that, I believe. And certainly our view of the past changes, but our view of the past changes because the present changes, which is perhaps something that Hegel was grappling with. How do you even get a true view of the past? So I don't know. It's very, very interesting. A student said, after reading the Marxism excerpt, sorry. After reading the Marxism excerpt, it became clear that every thought you produce is a result of some external force. No thought you have is independent. Well, that's quite interesting. That's a pretty radical interpretation of Marxism or determinism. Um, which is not to say that it's bad. It's quite good, I think, but definitely a radical, extreme determinism here, and that's fine. And certainly, when I said in the study questions and in the videos that this course is Marxist, what I meant is that it was a very limited way. This course is Marxist in the sense that it is exploring the idea that human consciousness, human thought, even human perception and sensation cannot be viewed ahistorically because all of those things are shaped by human surroundings that's changed through history. So this would be a very, very extreme version of that. Again, which is fine. Extreme versions of things can be true. I don't know if I would go so far, but that doesn't matter. So I like this. I mean, Marx, of course, thought that the external force was an economic force. What do you call material life? The way that we produce things. And his historical materialism, his view of history, basically claims that human consciousness is shaped by the relations of production, which are based upon the means of production. And that essentially in the 19th century, he was living in a bourgeois culture, a culture that was shaped by bourgeois capitalism. The connection there with Marshall McLuhan, I think, is that in place of material life, you can, to some degree, replace that with media as being the external force which is shaping us. So interesting thoughts here. Yeah, here's a long quote. Let me read part of it. Hegel's point is that our ideas or ways of life are constantly changing, and philosophy can only inform us of what old ideas or ways of life were, but cannot restore them back to current times. I think that that's true. I mean, that I don't know how interested anybody is in restoring things to. Well, maybe they are. It's called being reactionary, trying to force things back to a past or an imagined past. I think that that's true. We're moving forward, and there's no going back. And yes, philosophy can only inform us about old ideas or ways of life, what they were. I think that's probably true. It goes with some of the things I was saying about the last quote. And then, the acknowledgement that, Margolis believes the way we think is influenced by historical forces. Yes, shaped by, limited by, in a surreptitious way, and in a way that we probably can never be totally conscious of. We are shaped by historical forces. That is definitely his fundamental message. Now, this is a great challenge because it certainly does. I mean, it suggests a relativism, moral relativism, political, scientific, which is a very difficult thing to work out. But I think that's true, right or wrong. Here's some more commentary on Margolis. I agree with Margolis' statement regarding thinking as historicized, because our upbringing heavily influences our beliefs. Historicized thinking is why I think that it is hard for extreme Democrats and extreme Republicans to have an educated yet civil discussion regarding their political views. This is because the majority of people who identify with these groups were raised this way, and as humans, we naturally have the I'm right mindset before engaging in a discussion, rather than there is always someone wiser than me mindset. Historicized thinking is also toxic and damaging because it gives some people the excuse of discriminating against others and justify it with the, oh, that's how I was raised. Well, that's an interesting point. There comes a time where you must go into the world and create new experiences with an open mind, which will allow you to reflect and think about how my mindset can change. That's really interesting. I mean, comparing, just a sec, I have to go get the door. I'm going to pause. Sorry for the delay. I had to pause and bring in the groceries.
You're on the thing.
Sorry again. This can be difficult to do sometimes because you live with people, and they are people too, and you're trying to record something, and they have to live their lives. So we can all deal. Okay, so I think it's a really important and interesting commentary on the whole historicization thing, or historize or historicize thinking. And I think the student is quite right. People use that as an excuse for their prejudice, which is invalid. I mean, you know, you can't just reference the way you were raised to justify being prejudiced or bigoted. And that's certainly not what Margolis, and I don't think Hegel or Marx meant either. And I think it raises an interesting issue because Hegel, Marx, Margolis, and Marshall McLuhan talk in very broad terms about things, and especially about culture and historical periods. And I think all of them would have to admit that there is great variety within an historical period. That being said, I think they are saying that history shapes us all and shapes us in similar ways. And certainly one of the things that McLuhan is saying is that uh, electronic media are bound to have similar effects on us, no matter what our individual differences are or cultural differences are. Now, it may be that an interesting question is how electronic media and computer technology affect us depending upon what our personal circumstances are. That's an incredibly interesting question. I mean, our electronic media, does it have a different effect on the rich and poor, on different ethnic groups, on people who are oppressed as opposed to people who are not or less oppressed? And those are really interesting questions. And I think this student really gets to another really interesting question is about having an open mind, which is something that we all aspire to. Can you believe the kind of things that, let's say, Marx is saying, and also believe that you can have an open mind? I hope so, because I think it's true. You have to strive for that. You have to strive for truth, and you can't just throw up your hands and say, "Oh, this is what I believe because it was the way I was raised," or "This is what I believe because this is what my culture has inculcated in me." So this raises, I think, just some great philosophical questions. And that's it. So yeah, this is something I'll be doing every week. I offer this to you as hopefully something. Every video that I make is meant to hopefully enrich and deepen your understanding of the subject matter of the course. So that's what these things are for.